Cincinnati remembers. Where are we now? Where do we go from here? My name is Payne, or Lucius Payne Jr., some of you know me. I am president of the MLK Coalition. The coalition has been around since 1979 or 1978, depending on how you want to date the founding versus some activities that take place. We have, as an MLK Coalition, our primary charge to put on Cincinnati's official MLK Day program each year. How many of you have ever marched in the civil rights march that we have on MLK Day? All right, so you're kind of familiar with that. So then, of course, we have a program that progresses on after the march at Music Hall. I do want to let you know that if any of you have an interest in carrying on Dr. King's legacy, at mlkcoalition.org, you can get more information about our meetings and how to become a member. Further, to help defray the cost, we will be having some donations taken by the doors as you leave, and I'll kind of repeat that at the end. So we want to be respectful of everyone's time. We're going to get things moving. First of all, I'd like to ask for any elected officials to please stand up. Any elected officials? Okay, I thought we might have had some here. But if we don't, we will move right on, and I'm going to introduce our moderator for today, Dr. Littisha Bates. And I want to say it right. She is the Associate Professor of Sociology and a faculty affiliate of Africana Studies at the University of Cincinnati, where she is co-founder and executive board member of the Black Faculty Association. And of course, she has done many wonderful things, has many interesting classes that she does, and she is very much on fire to make a difference in this world, to be socially active because change is needed. So without further ado, I'd like to bring our moderator, Dr. Littisha Bates, up.
Good afternoon. Okay, let's try that one more time. Good afternoon. Thank you. I am so excited that you guys have come out to join us today, and I'm so grateful that the weather has held out on us. I am super excited about the list of presenters that we have today, and for us to be having this larger conversation, thinking about where are we now, where have we come from, and where are we going in the legacy of Dr. King, but more specifically around this event, his murder, his assassination. So I just want to give you guys a brief overview of kind of the flow of the event, because one of the things that I really value about the MLK Coalition is that we want to make sure that we're having conversations, community conversations. And so we have our panelists here today that are going to present their ideals around the theme, but we also have some time built in for audience participation and audience comments. So as you are sitting today and listening to our presenters, I really like for you to challenge yourselves to think about how you can actually participate in the conversation and not just be in the room, but be a part of the conversation, because there's space in our program for that. Our first presenter, who we are super lucky to have, not just because of the great work that he's doing in this city, but because what I know about him, having not known him personally, but have watched him from afar, how ordained God has, the ordination that God has placed on his life to do the work that he's doing. And we are so grateful to be able to be in his space today. Reverend Damon Lynch III. He is, of course, senior pastor here at New Prospect Baptist Church. He's a lifetime resident of the city of Cincinnati. He was educated in the Cincinnati public school systems and holds a bachelor's degree from Cincinnati Bible College. He's a faculty member of the Asset-Based Community Development Institute at Northwestern University in Chicago, Illinois. He has conducted workshops throughout the United States to many organizations on asset-based approach to problem solving and development. And to go off script just a little bit here, anybody who is in the city of Cincinnati, if you do not know who Damon Lynch is, you cannot tell me you are concerned about social justice in the city of Cincinnati. And so I think this man needs no introduction, but we do have to do those things that we have to do in the program. But without further ado, Pastor Lynch.
Dr. Bates, thank you. And welcome to all of us who are gathered here today. As she said, my name is Damon Lynch III, and as I always say, I am the proud pastor of the New Prospect Baptist Church, and that is where we are now. We call it the Summit Center, as well as the church. It is the community center for the community of Roselawn. For those of us who live in Cincinnati, we know that Roselawn is one of the few communities in the city that does not have a community center or a rec center, because this was it. And so we purchased this about 8 years ago, actually. And we are sitting right now on 22 acres of God-given land. We have 100 chickens out back right now laying eggs. You can purchase eggs before you leave. From what they tell me, they taste better than anything you can buy at Kroger. We have land, we grow food. We have planted 100 fruit trees throughout the community of Roselawn. So in the next year or so, fruit will be dropping to the ground. We have a 4-acre campsite that goes down to the Mill Creek. We have one of the largest gymnasiums in the city. We have an indoor walking track. We have 3 swimming pools. None of them are operable yet. And just a lot of good stuff. So we're excited about being here. And Dr. King is probably one of my greatest heroes. But I want to just deal with this from my own perspective. Oftentimes the question is raised about how far we've come, have we progressed, are things better? And the answer is always an equivocation. The answer that I almost always hear, it's never a yes or no. Are we better off than we were? It's never a yes or no. It's always, things are better, but we got a ways to go. Things are better, but we're still not there yet. It's never a yes or a no. Are we better off now than we were in 1968? It's always that equivocation. And I want to share today that I think there is a yes or no answer. And are we better off than we were in 68? And the answer is no. It's no. And it's probably like the more PC answer. Yeah, we're better, but we're not there yet. And that's the answer we always get to hear. I'm going to show you a video. I think it's about 5 minutes long because I only have 20 minutes, and I have a lot that I could say because I say it a lot. So the video is Neely Fuller. Neely Fuller is this elderly black guy who does commentary on what's happening in the black community. So if we could show that, and then after Neely Fuller, I'll come back, and we're going to talk about...
The white supremacists said, I can't maintain a system with black people being serious, so I'm going to redirect their seriousness, and I'm going to do it through something that they relate to best. I'm going to do it through a medium that they can relate to, and that is entertainment. So I'm going to twist and turn their entertainment in such a way that where it was anti-non-justice before, where they were trying to talk about justice and head in that direction, I'm going to redirect that whole machine right before their eyes, and since they are a primitive people, they won't even realize what I'm doing because it will all be fun, because I know how to package stuff that doesn't make sense so that it is fun. And I'll have them directing their entire existence to getting up in the morning and looking for something stupid to do. And they won't even know that they're looking for something stupid to do because they're just that stupid because I will have programmed them to be stupid. And from the late 1960s, after the death of Martin Luther King and the riots and the upheavals and all like this, and black people with their fists in the air and all like that and trying to stumble and fumble and find their way and get focus, the white supremacists made a blueprint and put it in action, and that is, I'm going to have these people so confused, they don't even know what they started out to do. And by the late 1970s, they had just about completed it. And we've been on that ever since. And you mentioned something very important. They are more comfortable than ever. But see, it's like making gorillas comfortable in a cage, or monkeys, or pandas. You still got them in a cage, but they're comfortable. See, so give him some bling-bling. It's like giving an animal, a brand new car, and training the animal to ride up and down the street in it. And then you stand back and point at the animal. Like one white man said in the late 1950s. He said he doesn't care what kind of car a Negro has. He said he's still a nigger. And when he rides by in a shiny car, to him, it's just a monkey in a car. White people built a car, put a monkey in it, trained the monkey to drive the car, so now you're looking at a monkey in a car. See, but black people don't see themselves that way. But this is how the white supremacists see us, and they are the ones who run our business. And we have to know that when they look at us, that's what they see. That's what they see. That's what they see. And at a subliminal level, what they see begins to spill over into our brains so that we, at a subliminal level, see each other that way. And indirectly see ourselves that way. And that's why here it is in the year 2008, we have no problem slaughtering each other and think it's fun. You can hear the 9mm popping in the night even as we speak. That's black people out there having fun, because that's what we're doing. F-U-N, that's what that comes under. That's entertainment. Killing each other. That's fun. That's almost the definition of black fun. If we're not doing that, we're not really having fun. If we're not doing harm to each other, saying something derogatory, and really, the crown and jewel, killing another black person, we're not really living. And we don't even know that that's our culture. And the white supremacists have very carefully engineered it. Now, this is very important to know in order to solve our problems. Because you say, well, now, knowing that, fella, what's the solution? One is very simple. Black people shouldn't even be in contact with each other unless they're talking about something constructive. That means the cell phone should be dead silent most of the time. Because you listen to the average black conversation in this area of the world on a cell phone, and what do you hear? You don't hear anything that's necessary to be said.
All right, if you could turn the light back on, please. So let me share. I handed out a document to each of you. It is entitled The Truth Behind the 40 Acres and a Mule. And I'll address solutions to what Neely Fuller just said. And so let me just, if I had to put, and so I'm actually going to read most of this. So it's not like I had to prepare a speech for you today. But if I had to title it, I would title it 18 Acres Short. Because I said we sit here today on 22 acres. We're 18 acres short. So Henry Louis Gates, and this is something called Special Order 15. And I shared this with our congregation maybe a month or so ago, and most of them had no idea, did not know about Special Order 15. So Henry Louis Gates says this: we've all heard the story of the 40 acres and a mule promises to former slaves. It's a staple of black history lessons, and it's the name of Spike Lee's film company. The promise was the first systemic attempt to provide a form of reparations to newly freed slaves, and it was astonishingly radical for its time, proto-socialist in its implications. In fact, such a policy would be radical in any country today. The federal government's massive confiscation of private property, some 400,000 acres, formerly owned by Confederate landowners, and its methodical redistribution to former slaves. What most of us haven't heard is that the idea really was generated by black leaders themselves. It's difficult to stress adequately how revolutionary this idea was. As the historian Eric Fauner puts in his book, Reconstruction, America's Unfinished Revolution, here in coastal South Carolina and Georgia, the prospect beckoned of a transformation of Southern society more radical even than the end of slavery. Try to imagine how profoundly different the history of race relations in the United States would have been had this policy been implemented and enforced. had the former slaves actually had access to the ownership of land, of property, if they had a chance to be self-sufficient economically, to build, accrue, and pass on wealth. After all, one of the principal promises of America was the possibility of average people being able to own land, and all that such ownership entailed. As we know all too well, this promise was not realized for the overwhelmingly majority of the nation's former slaves, who numbered about 3.9 million. We've been taught in school that the source of the policy, 40 acres and a mule, was Union General William T. Sherman's Special Field Order Number 15, issued on January 16, 1865. He puts in parentheses, the account is half true. Sherman prescribed the 40 acres in that order, but not the mule. So the mule part is not in the order. The mule would come later. But what many accounts leave out is that this idea of massive land redistribution actually was a result of a discussion that Sherman and Secretary of War Edwin Stanton had held 4 days before Sherman issued the order, with 20 leaders of the black community in Savannah, Georgia, where Sherman was headquartered following his famous March to the Sea. The meeting was unprecedented in American history. Today, we commonly use the phrase 40 acres and a mule, but few of us have read the order itself. 3 of its parts are relevant here. Section 1 bears repeating in full. The islands from Charleston, south, the abandoned rice fields along the rivers for 30 miles back to the sea, and the country bordering the St. Johns River, Florida, are reserved and set apart for the settlement of Negroes, now made free by the acts of war and proclamation of the President of the United States. That's Section 1, the land. Section 2 specifies that these new communities, and this is strong and interesting, these new communities, moreover, would be governed entirely by black people themselves. On the islands and in the settlements hereafter to be established, no white person would ever, unless military officers and soldiers detailed for duty, would be permitted to reside. The sole and exclusive management of affairs will be left to the freed people themselves. By the laws of war and orders of the President of the United States, the Negro is, what's that next word? The Negro is free and must be dealt with as such. Finally, Section 3 specifies the allocation of land. Each family shall have a plot of not more than 40 acres of tillable ground, and when it borders on some water channel with not more than 800 feet waterfront, in the possession of which land the military authorities will afford them protection until such time as they can do what? Protect themselves, or until Congress shall regulate their title. Turn to the last page. Many of you, I'm sharing with you stuff that you already know. So the very back page, very back. I'll skip some of it. You can read it later, because the very back asks, what became of the land that was promised? We know that this happened under the presidency of Abraham Lincoln. The president after Abraham Lincoln was a man by the name of Andrew Johnson. Andrew Johnson came in after Abraham Lincoln and rescinded Special Order 15. The freedmen, the slaves who got land, it was taken back from them. And so, we are where we are today. We are where we are today. 18 acres short. We are 18 acres short. So my challenge to all of us sitting here, and especially to the African Americans sitting here, is that reparations is still a demand. America understood in 1865 that it owed a tremendous debt. America tried to repay the debt in 1865. And if Special Order 15 had been allowed to go through, it would have been a radical difference in how America functions. Because who better to work 40 acres than those who have been working 40 acres for years for free? A radical difference. So we still strive for that. On April 3rd, 1968, Dr. King gave his last speech. And some say it was really his eulogy. And what was interesting in that eulogy, he said some things that those of us who lionizing now probably don't remember, but he talked about boycotting Wonder Bread, talked about boycotting Coca-Cola. He said that on April 3rd, 1968. He was assassinated on April 4th, 1968. And I understand boycotts. We boycotted Cincinnati in 2001 and 2002. Reverend Jesse Jackson right now is talking about boycotting Kroger because they closed 3 stores in Memphis, and of course they've closed stores here. And I understand that. But after that, then what? Then what? The challenge for us today is that although Special Order 15 was rescinded, we still should be striving to build strong, healthy black communities. Are we better off today than before? The answer you'll get is, yeah, we're better off, but we're not there yet. We are just as segregated in 2018 as we were in 1968. We are sitting here in the old Jewish Community Center. We still have, in the pool outside, the letters say JCC, Jewish Community Center. Every synagogue in Roselawn is now a black church. The Jewish synagogue, the Jewish Community Center in Roselawn is now owned by a black church. The exodus continues. So when you stand there in 68 and 64 and talk about integration, failed experiment. Roselawn was like 90-something% black. And people don't have to say it out of their mouths that it didn't work, just by your movement. It didn't work. Integration didn't work. So, yeah, we can boycott Kroger, which is actually, in my mind, saying, Kroger, would you please come back? Would you please come back? You left Avondale, you left Bond Hill, you left Walnut Hills, and you're headquartered in this city. And how do you have food deserts in a city that has the largest grocery store chain in the world headquartered in your city? How does that happen? So, but you can boycott them, which is really saying, please come back. Or you can do what Kia Patterson did in Compton and just open up grocery stores. Just open up grocery stores. Just open your own. And so Chika Akua, who was here for the Black Book Fair a few weeks ago, said this. He said, Damon, what's needed in the black community is 2 things. We need to raise capital and consciousness. Capital and consciousness. We can do both. We have to do both. I'll say, I don't know what my time is. So here's my thought. I put together a group here about a year ago called Community Economic Advancement Initiative. Our goal, and I say this in front of black people, white people, everybody, is we're coming to get the wealth. Bottom line, no excuses, we're coming to get the wealth. We're coming to own the land. We're in the process of purchasing the Valley Shopping Center down the street. Our goal is to put, of course, a black-owned, for those who live here, there's not one black-owned dry cleaner in the city of Cincinnati. As much money as I spend on dry cleaning clothes, come on, black people. We keep waiting. We keep waiting. And we watch other people do development, and then you know what happens? Then our cry is, well, what's the inclusion policy? What's the inclusion? Are we going to get 15%? What's the inclusion? We've been asking for inclusion for 400 years. They're going to put a music venue down on the banks, and they put it in the paper for like 3 weeks. We're looking for developers to do the music venue on the banks. It's going to seat about 6,000 people. And I'm watching, I'm like, okay, I'm waiting on somebody black to step up and say, all right, we'll develop it. Because if you're the developer, you don't have to sit around and pray and say, what's the inclusion? What percentage is ours? And they say, well, Damon, we can't develop a music venue on the banks. I'm like, you've been building these churches, what do you think they are? If you can build all these churches, which is, a music venue, What's the difference between building these churches with choirs and people singing and sound and lights, and you can't go build a music venue on the banks? My father always taught me, if you let a man beat you thinking, he'll beat you living every time. Think. We can do it. We've done it before. So why do I say we're worse off now? Because we used to build colleges, schools, and black banks, and black businesses, and black insurance companies, and we just let it all go away. We can do it again. We can do it again. So that is our goal. If Jesse comes to town to boycott Kroger, whatever, but that didn't help us build our own grocery store. That's what we need. That's what we need, capital and consciousness. Capital and consciousness. My last word is this. Forbes magazine, everybody, says by the year 2053, the median black wealth in America will be 0. Forbes magazine says by the year 2053, median black wealth in America will be 0. Because we're not going forward, we're going backwards. And individual success is not a measure of how we're doing as a people. So don't talk to me about Oprah or any of the rest of them or LeBron. It's not a measure of how we're doing as a people. So I invite you to join me. My goal in the time, I realize I've got fewer years ahead of me than I got behind me. So my goal in the time I have here is to build wealth in the black community, because wealth is something you can pass down. Income, you can't pass that down. You stop working, income stops. Wealth, you can pass down to your children and your grandchildren. We have to build wealth. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Pastor Lynch. So at this time, we want to open it up to some audience questions and our commentary related to our theme, or more specifically related to what Pastor Lynch has said. Don't forget, I'm a professor, so if y'all don't want to talk, I will. But again, we care about community conversation, so we want to make sure that the audience has an opportunity. I have a mic that I'm going to be passing around, so if you'd like to have the mic, please raise your hand.
Thank you, and good afternoon. Thank you, Pastor Lynch, for what you shared with us. One of the things Jesus said was, "Has thou been made whole?" That's very important to me. I went to the library about a year ago, and I got a book, a couple of years ago, and I got a book on black businesses in Cincinnati. And back in the maybe 30s to the 60s, we were very prominent in black-owned businesses. My question is, why did we sell? Because it's one thing to gain, and it's another thing to give away. And something I like to say that I believe when it talks about what I've learned on how to make a slave, this is just my personal belief. You give them what they desire. Then you feed them in small rations while slowly killing them inside. Now, I don't like when somebody says, my cell phone, my TV, my new clothes, my this and that, I've made my capital. And sometimes we do. We think the outward things are more important than our personality. So once again, I want to take it to what Jesus said, "Has thou been made whole?" And what is it going to take for us to feel like a whole people? Because we know we are able to progress outwardly. Presidents, basketball, everything Pastor Lynch said. We have churches. If you can open a church, you can open a business. You can make this whatever you want to make it and still have a church. But what is it going to take for us to feel whole as a people? Because I get tired of white people this, white people that. What do we need even outside of having our own capital and consciousness? What makes us whole as a whole people, or is it really individual? Thank you.
I guess the question is what will make us whole. I think it begins with, once again, believing in ourselves, believing in our ability, believing in the collective, working together. I mean, you're not whole if you're not part of the whole. I do believe in leadership, and I know many people don't. I know that there's this common idea we don't need another King, we don't need another Malcolm, we don't need another, charismatic leader. I do believe in charismatic leadership because somebody has to cast vision for people to be willing to follow. And that can be you. I mean, you can be your own leader, your own visionary. I understand that, but I do think sometimes it is important to have that person who stands and say, "Hey, let's do it. We can do it. Yes, we can. Si se puede." So in some sense, I mean, that's one of the things I do here as a pastor, is cast vision and direction and say, "Let's go get it." So that's my best. I mean.
And I think as sociologically thinking about how institutions work, right? So we know that we have had success as people. Black Wall Street was a thing, right? But we also know that Black Wall Street was burned to the ground because institutional and systematic racism is real. And so as we think about making ourselves whole, we also have to attack these systems that are put in place to make sure that we are not able to be successful.
So, Pastor Lynch, the proud pastor of New Prospect Baptist Church, what is your vision for building consciousness?
Building consciousness. Well, I'm a proclaimer, so I believe in proclamation. As a preacher, I believe in proclamation. So I do it through word, but I think we'll also do it through successes and action. So if in the next 4 months or so, we own the Valley Shopping Center, when I say we, it's pretty much, African Americans, then there has to be a message that goes out, is that this is ours. We love it, we take care of it. The problems that Kroger says we have while we close is pilferage. Well, we don't steal from our own grocery store. This belongs to us. So a sense of consciousness comes from, again, being part of a collective, having ownership and pride. The things that we used to have when we were in segregation. My father grew up poor, my mother grew up poor, but they say all the time, we never knew we were poor until they told us.
That's right.
We didn't know we were poor. They told us we were poor, but we grew up in this community that had doctors and lawyers and the teacher and the drunkard and everybody. And it was just Cornel West puts it like this. We have to put the word neighbor back on hood. So we don't live in a hood. I know that's like an affectionate term, but a hood is a dangerous place. Neighbor is where people give and share gifts and work together. So when you put the word neighbor back on hood, I think a sense of consciousness, again, begins to rebirth. Anybody else? Yes.
Yes, my name is Wayne Sloan, and I do have a business. It is business insurance, where I insure business owners. And on yesterday, I had a conversation with one of my clients who was from Nigeria, a woman, and she said she learned in her country that you must have 4 streams of income because one, of course, is not enough. And then she said, she also learned that her family said, what would a free man do? And so she said, we're entitled to be free to build, to do whatever we want to do. So it is a consciousness of recognizing that we are free to do what we need to do.
And for all of us sitting here, and when I talked about the resegregation of America, America early on was segregated by law. Obviously now it's segregated by choice. There's no law that means we have to be segregated. There's a school right next door to our church, Roselawn Condon School. If I dare you, walk in there Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and try to find a white kid. It's like an all-black school. You may find one, two, and so we went through this whole struggle where it's so important for integration that black kids and white kids like be in the same classroom. It's an all-black school, and there are like 4, 5, or 6 of those. And then they're all white schools. So we have resegregated. Let's just acknowledge it. But this time, let's make it work. So for the black community, if you acknowledge that segregation exists once again, well, don't just roll over and wait for somebody else to come in and rebuild your community. I mean, Avondale's being rebuilt because institutions are doing it. Evanston's being rebuilt because Xavier's doing it. So if you're in a community that doesn't have an institution, you're in trouble. The institutions are coming in, taking over the community. You know, I share all the time, and hopefully this will happen. When you leave here, if you go down Summit to Reading Road and make a left or a right, there's an old Ponderosa building sitting there. It used to be a Ponderosa restaurant. It's been vacant as long as I've been here. I think the only thing that went in after Ponderosa, and this is what happens in the black community, was a church. Was a church. It's like we need another church like a hole in the head, but empty building, black church. Well, it left, so the building sits empty. And people who live in Roselawn, Bond Hill, Reading, we drive by it all day, every day. Nobody has a vision for it. Nobody has a thought or a plan. And so this is for my white friends in here, and I know I need to sit down. So our church was in Over the Rhine. I was there for 23 years. If you go from Liberty and Reading all the way to Galbraith and Reading, just drive out Reading Road, stop in every gas station but one, and that's Thornton's. It is owned by somebody who is not African American. You'll pass through almost 5 predominantly black neighborhoods. Stop in every gas station, every corner store, every little place selling fish. You'll pass through 5 predominantly black neighborhoods, and we own none of it. And I'm supposed to say, things are better, but we're just not there yet.
We have time.
And so all day long, black dollars are going into those pockets. And outside of those gas stations, they're driving BMWs and Mercedes and muscle cars all day long. I'm sorry, Dr. Bates.
No, that's okay. We have time for one more question during this session. At the end of all the panelists' keynotes, we will have time to address each panel member. We'll join one another on the stage. So if you have more questions for Pastor Lynch, please hold them.
And I'm not saying this because I'm mad at anybody. I'm not at all. I glory in those who are doing it. I'm saying there's opportunity out there. I do not, I got to say this. 23 years in OTR. For almost 20-something of those years, it was considered the worst community in the country. For many of those years, it was the worst community in the state. At the same time, it was the most serviced community in the state. We had every social service known to humankind in OTR. Drop-in center, Tender Mercies, City Gospel Mission, Free Store Food Bank, you name it, Over the Rhine had it. We had every social service agency known to humankind in one neighborhood, and people were still saying we were the worst. People who wanted to do good work. If you had a church out in the suburbs and you wanted to do something, little white kids would jump on the van, drive into Over the Rhine, jump out, pick up trash, eat pizza, laugh, drive away. We had, so in other words, surrounding people with services does not make them whole. If surrounding people with services made people whole, Over the Rhine would have been the best community in the nation. No community had more social services than OTR. We would have been the best community in the nation if that's what changed communities. Now, what is interesting now, with the renaissance of OTR, guess who's gone? Drop-in center, you got to go. You need to be on Queensgate near nobody. City Gospel Mission, get out. So what we cannot allow, black community, is for, once again, our communities that are struggling, that they feed us services. We've learned the lesson that does not work. Our kids do not need to grow up in a community full of services, but a community full of opportunity. They need to wake up and see opportunity and people who look like them changing their community. I've said enough.
Thank you, Pastor Lynch. At this time, we're going to hear from Dr. Adam Clark, who is an associate professor of theology at Xavier University. Dr. Clark believes that theological education today must function as a counterstory. To this end, he is intentional about pedagogical practices that raise critical consciousness. That's that word again, y'all, consciousness. By going beneath surface meanings, unmasking conventional wisdoms, and reimagining the good. Dr. Clark received the Faculty Support Award by the Black Student Association. His courses include Black Theology, Jesus and Power, Faith and Justice and Religion, and Hip Hop. He currently serves as co-chair of Black Theology Group at the American Academy of Religion. He publishes in the area of Black theology and Black religion and participates in social justice groups at Xavier and in the Cincinnati area. And it's also my understanding that this is his house as well because he's a proud member of New Prospect Church.
Oh, yes, I say it plain. America was never America to me, and yet I swear this oath that America will be. America was never America to me, and yet I swear this oath, America will be. This is a poem by Langston Hughes, 1938. And I think it defines one of the most perplexing aspects of African American life. That is the gap between America's practice and America's ideals. America's practice. America was never America to me. America's ideals, and yet America will be. Scholars call this the paradox of patriotism, to be committed to a nation that isn't committed to you. So to follow King, or I think this really sets the table. Let me just say it this way. That what it means to inhabit the legacy of King in the contemporary moment means to actually be a citizen of a world that does not yet exist. A just world, a compassionate world, a joyful world, one that cares about the poor and the vulnerable, that respects the earth, that embraces difference, racial, religious, sexual, but that world hasn't been born yet. So to follow King in this contemporary moment is to become a visionary, to see new worlds in the making and help bring them into being. This weekend, we joined people, fellow citizens all throughout the country, in trying to reflect on the meaning of King's legacy 50 years after his assassination. And we collectively asked the question, where do we go from here? How much progress has been made? Are we closer to achieving King's dream? A couple of facts. In 1968, Lyndon B. Johnson was president. Later that year, Richard Nixon was elected. 50 years later, we got Trump. 50 years ago, America was involved in a messy war overseas. It was drawn into it by false pretenses. 50 years later, America is in wars overseas, drawn into it by false pretenses. 50 years ago, King was preparing to initiate a poor people's campaign because America was unaccountable to its poor. 50 years later, with the dismantling of health care, tax cuts for the rich, America remains unaccountable to its poor. I don't mention these disturbing facts to say that the circumstances of 1968 are identical to today. Certainly the freedom movements in America have made significant and meaningful changes. Most remarkably, the election of a black president, which I never thought I'd see, but that's pretty remarkable.